It's the NCAA versus some SEC quarterbacks and a basketball player. One denied. What about the quarterbacks? Time to squad up here on the SEC Squad.
You're talking ball with the SEC Squad. From Alabama to Tennessee, from Georgia to Oklahoma, from Auburn to Texas, it's the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network bringing you scoops, breakdowns, and the most comprehensive preview of the upcoming SEC weekend. It's the SEC Squad, and we have a seat for you. Hurt feelings and thin skins are prohibited. Squad up, you're part of the SEC Squad.
What is up, everybody? Happy Thursday and welcome into it. Pull up your chair and crack open your favorite beverage, as our guy Chris Gordy, who's not here tonight, would say. This is SEC Squad time. I'm your host tonight, Eric Cain at Locked On Vols. We're joined by Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss, Corey Burton, Locked On Vandy, and Jimmy Stein, Locked On Bama. Appreciate you guys for being here and making all of our Locked On shows your first listen, your first watch each and every single morning. We are all a part of Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network available, your team every single day. Today's show, going to talk about the court systems. Joey Aguilar, Trinidad Chambliss coming up with preliminary injunctions later this week, or end of the week, I should say. Trinidad's was today, Joey's is tomorrow. Charles Bediako denied his preliminary injunction. What's the next step there? Talk a little transfer portal recap. Who's our best transfer portal addition for each of our teams, and what grade would we give each of our teams for the transfer portal action? And we'll talk a little hoops to conclude this episode of Locked On SEC Squad, the SEC Squad show. All right, boys. Jimmy, let's start with you. Obviously, Stephen and I very invested in the tail end of this week with preliminary injunction hearings for Trinidad Chambliss and Joey Aguilar. Charles Bediako denied his preliminary injunction. He played on two separate, or I guess one that was extended, TROs, temporary restraining order. His season looks like it has come to an end. What's the next move, if anything, for Bediako, for Alabama, and what's the next step in this story?
I don't think legally, I'll be surprised if the Bediako lawsuit sort of continues. He can continue on with what amounts to a money damages suit against the NCAA. Basically, his ask to be eligible while the suit is pending has been denied. That doesn't mean the lawsuit's over, but I'll be surprised if it continues. I think what Charles really wanted was to play. I think Alabama obviously would like to see him play, but Alabama was not a party to this lawsuit. This was Charles Bediako individually versus the NCAA. Alabama was an interested party, but they weren't an actual party to the lawsuit. I don't think much is going to come from anything forward legally as far as this case is concerned. And Alabama's going to continue without him. Obviously, the plan before the season was to play without Charles Bediako. This case never would have happened. The Bediako whole ordeal never would have happened without the Baylor case. Yeah. It wasn't like this was planned back in November, December. This came about as a result of the NCAA allowing the Baylor kid to play. So I think Alabama just goes forward without Bediako, which was the plan from the jump.
Corey, I'm really intrigued to see how the selection committee views Alabama, later in the season. Are they going to wipe out every game that he played in, just act like it was a no contest, doesn't matter? Tennessee won on the road at Alabama with Charles Bediako on Raw. I mean, that's a big win for Tennessee. Does that loss not count for Alabama? I think they were 3-2. Is that right, Jimmy?
3-2.
Do those 3 wins not count for them? I mean, I'm really intrigued to see how the selection committee, college basketball media personalities, how they view this team when it comes later, in March for Selection Sunday.
This will be interesting, Eric, now that you mentioned that, because it'll be hard for me to believe that they're going to punish a team like Tennessee for beating Alabama. But then again, it's hard to reward Alabama for playing with Bediako. So it's really that catch-22 situation of, okay, do you punish Tennessee and give them a lower seed because that win didn't count? Do you simultaneously reward Tennessee and say, hey, that was an impressive win, but then like with Alabama, it's, okay, they had Bediako. It doesn't count, doesn't really hurt them. They were going to, doesn't really hurt them, doesn't really help them, those just kind of get thrown out in the trash for Alabama, and they just have to hope that the rest of their wins and rest of their resume can stand without those 5 games.
Yeah, I think you should have a situation to where if you have a quad 1 win, like Tennessee beating Alabama in Alabama with Bediako, and he almost needs to be a quad 1 plus or something to where there's even a bonus given to the Tennessee player because
I'm with me.
yeah, they played against a pro. I mean, they legitimately did. Now, I'm not saying that Alabama should have to vacate a single loss. I'm not talking about anything like that. But I'm saying that teams that beat those Alabama teams, those 2 wins, it almost needs to be a bonus attached to that win.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair too because, it wasn't. This is a weird one because they ruled him temporarily eligible, then they snatched it back. So it's not like they played an illegal player. It's just he was good and then he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
How do you treat that? Because they didn't break any rules. It wasn't against the rules.
Yeah, I mean, Joey Aguilar right now, if Tennessee had a football game today, he could play because he's under a temporary restraint. He's under a TRO. So, I mean, he could play. So Alabama didn't break any rules. I'm really intrigued to kind of see how this Crimson Tide team is viewed. Real quick, Jimmy, before we shift on to the quarterbacks, where does Alabama basketball go from here? I guess we can talk about it more in segment 3, but any big change not having Bediako in the lineup moving forward?
A little bit. Alabama doesn't really have a great backup center situation, so I think they're going to probably learn to go with a little more small ball at times. One thing, whether Bediako's in there or not, Alabama has been down 4 and 5 players all season long. It's been the most remarkable run of injuries. Like Nate Oates has said, he's never seen anything like it in his career. A typical game is Alabama out 4 guys, and who those 4 guys are changes week to week. There's been very few games where Alabama's best players have all been on the court at the same time. So Alabama's got to get healthier. I would hope that one thing the committee might take into account, if it ever happens, is by the time March rolls around, if Alabama's actually healthy for the first time all season. But in terms of playing without Bediako, Aiden Sherrill is a good center. He's going to have to play more minutes, and Alabama is going to have to play a little more small ball at times. But Nate Oates has been comfortable with that throughout most of his career.
3 SEC preliminary injunction, 1 denied. That's Charles Bediako. It is injunction day for Stephen Willis, for Trinidad. How we feeling? By the time this airs, it had already taken place this morning, but big day for Ole Miss. How's this week been for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty weird because it's insane how almost excited and confident Ole Miss fans are going into this situation. And I tried to explain to people, the NCAA did a really good job of trying to paint Trinidad Chambliss with the Diego Pavia brush to where you're you were saying that D2 didn't count when that wasn't the case at all. This was a simple 6th-year medical redshirt thing that basically has been in college football for the last 40, 50 years. You always had 6th-year seniors due to injury. And because of that, everybody kind of ignored what was going on. The NCAA said that Ferris State wasn't even participating and that Trinidad Chambliss just didn't play because he wasn't good enough. That was the original talking points. Got immediately disproved. And then this week, the attention was drawn to the fact that during the Ferris State National Championship game, Trinidad Chambliss, his timeline was mentioned of having a medical red shirt in 2022. It completely changes the narrative overall with that. It's been submitted by Ole Miss for a reconsideration from the NCAA. Nothing might happen. It might have already happened by the time you listen to this. But that on top of the injunction, everything, it just feels like Ole Miss fans are just biding their time. And listen, if anybody besides Trinidad Chambliss takes the first snap for Ole Miss in 2026, I would be stunned at this point.
It's wild, man, because we were talking off air, all 3 preliminary injunctions, all 3 different cases, all 3 tried at the local level. Obviously, Alabama's case didn't go Bediako's case didn't go its way. You've got so much confidence in Trinidad. I have no clue about Joey Aguilar. His injunction hearing is going to be tomorrow. We'll see what happens. He's fighting something. His is the Diego Pavia brush, essentially, right? Yours an injury. Bediako's is something different. I have no feel on it. I'm leaning that it's going to work out, but what's interesting is the lawyer that's representing the NCAA represented the NCAA against Nico Iamaleava's case a couple years ago, took that L. He is from Knoxville, played football at Webb, played football at Tennessee Tech, got his graduate degree from Tennessee. He's been all over the place, and he was the lawyer in the Charles Bediako case, actually, too. So,
I think he's in the Trinidad case, too.
He is. Ask you.
All over the place, man. All over the place. So it's wild. Like I have no clue. I don't know what's going to happen with Joey, but like you're like confidence level 11 out of 10, and I love it.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see what happens. It is, again, it's unlikely the judge is going to rule from the bench in a preliminary injunction hearing. It's possible. It's unlikely. So we'll see what happens with Trinidad. We'll see what happens with Joey Aguilar. We already know the case for Charles Bediako, but this is all big when we're talking about the outlook for Ole Miss, the outlook for Tennessee in terms of the 2026 season. No doubt about that. Speaking of our teams for the 2026 season, who was the best transfer portal addition for Tennessee, for Vandy, for Alabama, and for Ole Miss? All that and more coming up next as we continue here on the SEC Squad on a Thursday afternoon.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Dawn Staley and South Carolina remain on top of the SEC standings after handing Tennessee their worst defeat in program history with a final score of 93-40. In the 43-point win, South Carolina shot 69% from the field. Tessa Johnson had a perfect shooting night, scoring 24 points, shooting 4 for 4 from the floor, including 2 threes, and made all 4 of her free throws. And UCLA remains undefeated in Big Ten play, topping Michigan 69-66 as Player of the Year contender Lauren Betts put up a double-double, scoring 16 points, collecting 16 rebounds, and adding 5 assists and 3 blocks. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Welcome back here to the SEC Squad. I am Eric Cain, Locked On Ball, Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss, Jimmy Stein, Locked On Bama, and Corey Burton, Locked On Vandy here. Hope you guys are enjoying the ride here. A lot to discuss, and I'm not sure why we were throwing shade at the Lady Balls there in that ad read, but it is what it is. Let's talk about the transfer portal. When you lose by 43, you deserve all the shade, all right?
That is true.
Corey Burton, who was the best transfer portal get for the Vanderbilt Commodores?
Well, if you look offensively, it's got to be take your pick between Ja'Cory Thomas, wide receiver from Old Dominion, or Javante Connor, who's going to be the Eli Stowers replacement. Both guys were sorely needed. And then if you look at the offensive line, Bo Johnson, coming from now Mountain West football program, North Dakota State. And so the combination of those 3 guys, I think, are going to make this Jared Curtis, the transition into the Jared Curtis era, a lot smoother. Defensively, Ricardo Jones is the best transfer portal get we got on that side of the ball from the all conference safety from Clemson.
Is Curtis going to start? I mean, is that a foregone conclusion?
They paid him too much money to not start. He has a big live arm. I mean, it's just they're going to take their lumps with them. They're going to develop them, and they're just going to see what's going on. I would be shocked if Blaze Berlowitz or Jack Elliott take snaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we live in an era to where you got to go out there and win games, no doubt about it. But oftentimes, if there's a tie or if these 2 players are even, who's got the bigger investment? You go with the bigger investment. That's just
it's almost like draft capital at this point.
That's business.
That's where we're at.
Jimmy, when you look at Alabama, who's the best get for Alabama?
Probably Devin Tompkins, who's a defensive line transfer from USC. Alabama lost multiple starters on the defensive line. Tim Keene into the NFL draft, LT Overton into the draft, James Smith to the transfer portal. So Alabama's looking for 3 new defensive line starters. They have some interesting players returning, but Devin Tompkins is the best of the defensive line signees from the portal. He was a good player at USC. I think Rivals rated him the number 2 defensive lineman in the portal. He could play inside at the defensive tackle, 3-tech type position, or outside in Alabama's scheme as a bandit. But I look for Devin Tompkins to make immediate impact. Caleb Woodson at inside linebacker from Virginia Tech has a good chance to be an immediate starter. Alabama lost their 3 leading inside linebackers from last season. They were all seniors. They've all moved on to pro football. So Caleb Woodson has an excellent opportunity to become an immediate starter. He was a 2-year starter and a captain at Virginia Tech before transferring to Alabama. I would also look for immediate impact on the offensive line. Alabama signed, I believe, 6 offensive linemen out of the portal.
Wow.
Several of them have an opportunity to win starting spots. So my answer today is pre-spring is Devin Tompkins and Caleb Woodson. I won't be surprised, Eric, at the end of the spring if I'm telling you a better answer is one of those offensive linemen.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of have this conversation before spring practice, then after spring practice, heading into camp, and then, of course, after the season because it can change a couple different times. It's interesting. Alabama bringing in 6 offensive linemen via the portal, a couple of defensive linemen, a couple of linebackers. Obviously, had to replace the duo of Quay Russaw and James Smith. Those 2 guys, the package deal, they visited Tennessee, elected to go to Ohio State. Steven, what about Ole Miss? Who's the best or the collection of best players via the transfer portal?
Yeah, whenever you asked this question a little bit earlier, I started thinking about it. It's like, is it Jay Crawford, the cornerback that came over from Auburn, which allows Ole Miss to get back to playing man coverage and letting Pete Golding attack a little bit that he wasn't able to do last year? Or I could be a troll and say it was Luke Farrelly, or maybe even Blake Purchase, the transfer from Oregon. But
explain for those that don't understand.
Oh, Luke Farrelly, the transfer from Clemson, caused Dabo Sweeney to essentially melt down on air and go completely nuts. And that story lasted about 3 days and died down. And Steve Spurrier actually came out and said that somebody needs to let Dabo know that no rules anymore. So that was kind of funny. But going back to it, I think Blake Purchase would be a big pick as a jack player on the edge, the transfer from Oregon. But until we find out about Trinidad Chambliss, I think the number 1 leader in the clubhouse needs to be Deuce Knight, the 5-star left-handed quarterback transfer from Auburn. I know everybody, you got a quarterback from Auburn. How good can he be? He's a really athletic guy and has traits that can be unbelievably explosive in Ole Miss's offense. So that's very intriguing.
Yeah, spent some time in the state of Tennessee when he was in high school, and then he transferred to was it Mississippi? Was it Mississippi for his senior year? Whatever it was him and George McIntyre, the 2 in-state quarterbacks that Tennessee was obviously targeting. Went ahead and went with George McIntyre, and he could be Tennessee's quarterback depending on Joey Aguilar, depending on the 5-star Faison Brandon. Quarterback very unsettled, maybe more so after this week. When you look at Tennessee, real quick, Stephen, how many left? Because, again, coaching change. How many left and how many did Ole Miss get in the portal?
I think Ole Miss lost about 15. They only lost 4 players to LSU. The trend is when a coach leaves, that usually a bunch of players follow. Only 4 players ended up going to LSU, and that kind of, to me, is a testament to exactly how that was thought of and the way that all went down. Mm-hmm. But Ole Miss got lucky on that one. They lost a offensive lineman, went to Alabama, and offensive lineman went to Auburn. Couple of good players, but nobody that was going to be real contributors. Ole Miss didn't lose too many guys that are going to play a lot. And if they're at the point where next season, if the quarterback gets right, they have legitimate Atlanta hopes going in, even though the schedule gets harder.
Yeah,
Tennessee got to play Vandy this year, Steve.
Ole Miss has to go to Nashville twice.
Really?
Yeah, they played Louisville first game of the season in Nashville.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Trey Richardson transferred to Louisville. He's already doubtful. He's already doubtful for week 1 though, because he had surgery.
As Nick Saban once said, only easy place to play in the SEC is in Nashville, and then Alabama unfortunately stumbled that next week.
Yeah, for Nick.
Yeah,
there's a lot of easy places to play for Nick.
Yeah.
We look at Tennessee. Tennessee had 26 when you count like former walk-ons, all that. I mean, everybody encompassing 26 leave. Tennessee brought in 21. Tennessee brought in a huge portal class. I mean, really had to remake the defense, specifically the secondary. And again, like I could go. I mean, I've written so many stories about Tennessee's transfer portal class because there were some immediate impact players. Kayan Lee, the cornerback, 2-year starter at Auburn. He's going to be a starter at corner. TJ Metcalf, formerly of Arkansas, All Big Ten at Michigan. He's going to play safety. Quay Moss coming over from Kansas State. He's going to play the nickel spot. Chaz Coleman, defensive end, was ranked number 3 in the transfer portal rankings per On 3 this cycle from Penn State. Amari Campbell, the linebacker, following Jim Knowles from Penn State. There's a lot that I like about this class, for Tennessee specifically. I'm going to go with an under-the-radar one, though, because I think it's a huge position of need, defensive tackle. 2 years ago, Tennessee lost Amari Thomas, Omar Norman-Lott, Elijah Simmons, defensive tackles. This year, they say goodbye to Jackson Moy, Bryson Eason, Dom Bailey, a lot of their big guys up front. Xavier Gilliam from Penn State coming over, pretty productive player, very athletic, 3-down defensive tackle. Rodney Gardner still at Tennessee despite the defensive coordinator changeover. Does a really good job of developing talent, but plays a lot of different guys. Somebody needs a leader up there, the defensive tackle. That's probably my answer. The sexy answer is Chaz Coleman. I think the sky's the limit for that guy. Long, athletic. Suffered a little bit of an injury, so he didn't see a ton of playing time, and his production certainly wasn't there as a true freshman, but there's a reason Ohio State wanted him. There's a reason Lane Kiffin and LSU wanted him. South Carolina made a real big push there at the end. He comes with Jim Knowles to Tennessee. I think Chaz Coleman on the edge has a chance to be really, really good for the Volunteers. And how can you not like Amari Campbell? Had over 100 tackles at North Carolina, 100 tackles at Penn State last year, knows the defense, and everybody talks about how, well, Jim Knowles is great, but it takes 3 or 4 years, for that defense to come around, right? Well, you've got a defensive tackle, you got a linebacker, you got a safety. Oh, you got 2 defensive linemen, a linebacker and a safety. You have a defensive ends coach, and you have the secondaries coach, all coming with Jim Knowles. So I think that's going to accelerate that process for Tennessee on the defensive side of the football. If you could give your team a grade for the transfer portal, Steven, what would it be?
I would say, and just a straight A. They had a really good portal class. I know I'm a homer, big deal. But when you look at needs that were basically upkept, you got a quarterback, Deuce Knight. You got wide receivers and Horatio Fields and Jonte Cook. You remade the secondary with Edwin Joseph and Jay Crawford and Janelle, the safety from Georgia over there. You got Luke Farelli. You got the linebacker from Baylor. They remade their defense at a higher level to where the talent actually jumped up. And according to the collective person at Ole Miss, they have very high hopes for what this defense can be. And honestly, we're going to be real. If Ole Miss had a defense that could bow up and stop the run and play man coverage and do the things that need to do, they would have beaten Miami, and they would have been playing Miami on Monday night. And that is what Pete Golding's trying to do, and that's what the transfer portal kind of accomplished. I'm really, really excited to see what Blake Purchase can do as a true end. The transfer from Oregon, he was going to start at Oregon. If they lost either of the 2 ends that were starting above him this year, they decided to come back. Blake Purchase hit the road as a benefit for Pete Golding. I do think it was an A transfer portal class, number 2 in the 24/7 rankings. And they signed a lot of big-name, big-school players, and not for a ton of money either. That's the cool thing about this is Walker Jones and the Grove Collective. They've discovered it's like, hey, this wide receiver's a talented player, but he had quarterback problems, so we can get him at a little bit of a discount. So that's what they did with Trey Harris. That's what they did with Deshaun Stribling, and that's what they're trying to do with Horatio Fields coming from Auburn.
We got an A. Anybody beating an A? Corey, Jimmy?
I'm going to go with a A minus, right there on the cusp, because I think based on what they lost and what they gained, I think they gained a lot of great things. What they lost was guys that I think they were getting ready to shed anyway to make room for this great high school class that they signed and make room for some of these bigger name portal guys. So I think they filled their needs with quality guys, especially on the offensive line. Micah DeBose coming over from Alabama is one of my favorites because he was signed as a tackle because they probably wanted him to play the tackle, but he's coming down to play guard.
Mike DuBose came from Alabama.
Yeah, he's coming back. This eligibility thing's getting crazy. I want want to see how, you want to talk about a veteran guy.
Trust me. You want Micah Debose and not Mike Dubose. Trust me on this.
Yeah. Micah Debose. Yeah. He's coming down to play guard for Vanderbilt. I think that's a better natural fit for him anyway. So you get an all-conference safety. You get a corner from Texas A&M. You load up your edge position, getting a guy from LSU who has a ton of potential and a lot of speed and a lot of things. So you get weapons for Jared Curtis with Cole Adams. Jimmy, familiar with him too. And Ja'Cory Thomas, which I think Cole Adams fits a really nice role for Vanderbilt, not only on offense, but on special teams as well. So just a ton of great pieces. I mean, yeah, it sucks that you lose Trey Richardson and Randon Fontenette to the portal, and you lose a ton of guys to graduation in NFL, but I thought Clark Lee did a phenomenal job of replacing those guys.
30 seconds, Jimmy. I talked too long. It's my fault. 30 seconds. Give me your grade for Alabama.
C+ in the transfer portal. Not enough immediate impact guys. Several guys who might contribute. That, however, is offset by a high school class that's showing up that's an A or an A+. 3 or 4 of the high school players could be immediate impactful players, even at positions like running back and wide receiver.
So I'm going to give Tennessee a B. And I want to separate the quarterback conversation from this, but you can't, right? And we don't know about Aguilar and all that. They got faith in the young guys. They took a swing at Sam Levitt. They turned their nose at Bo Prevula. Everything else, I mean, need check. I mean, Tennessee brought in 21 players, checked all the boxes, remade that secondary. I think it's solid. B+ is what I'm going to give them right here for the Tennessee transfer portal grade. What about your team on the basketball court? Getting closer and closer to March. Who's hot? Who's not? Who's real? Who's not? SEC basketball, the conversation when we return right here on SEC Squad. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. You know, for years and years and years, Corey, he did my taxes. He can't do it anymore. It got too complicated. So I
stayed out of jail.
I got an expert from our friends over at TurboTax. TurboTax full service does my taxes for me. Trusted local expert, not Corey, a trusted local expert here in Knoxville, not Nashville. Start to finish, taking the stress, taking out the guesswork when my taxes that are a little complicated, get it done for me. They handle everything from W-2s, self-employed forms, 1099s, working to get every single deduct. Guys, we know this line of work. We have got to record everything, and the great people at TurboTax really helps find every deduction possible. Again, it's a peace of mind. Let them do the work for you this tax season. For a limited time, you can get your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert did not file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to real life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. That is TurboTax.local to book your appointment today. SEC squadding it up. Let's talk basketball here to conclude this edition of the SEC Squad. Who's real, who's not? Alabama's obviously a pretty talented basketball team. Vanderbilt started out really hot, kind of treading water here lately. Tennessee, a lot of talent there, playing better, blowing double-digit leads to Kentucky, very frustrating. Ole Miss is down there towards the bottom of the conference.
Yeah, they play basketball.
They play basketball. That's true. Corey, what's your thoughts on Vanderbilt right now? What needs to happen for Vanderbilt to get back to where it was to begin the season? A big win earlier this week.
Yeah, huge win on the road against Auburn. They literally were limping into that game, missing 2 key pieces, a key substitute and a starter. Already have front court mismatch issues going into that game. They went down to Auburn, Neville Arena, which I thought Auburn was going to win the front court battle, and that was going to be the difference in this game. But, and the fact that Vanderbilt looked like a JV team against Oklahoma, but they come into the Neville Arena, they're focused, and they get the win. And they were led by double digits for most of that game. Auburn made a run there towards the end, but they held on. Tyler Tanner, again, probably the MVP of the SEC, had 23 points after scoring 37 points on Saturday. I mean, he's got to be averaging close to 20 now at this point. I don't see how his average is not above 20 with his scoring output. But I mean, that dude is an absolute stud. So the Vandy roller coaster just keeps going on. They're either blowing people out or getting blown out themselves. And there's a couple of close wins in there in between, but it's like this with Vanderbilt right now. They're back on the upswing after what I thought was a pretty bad, embarrassing loss against Oklahoma.
I think you could say that for all of our teams, up, down, up, down. I mean, Florida's Florida, really, really good. Kentucky, a challenging start to the season, but
that's one of the teams Vanderbilt killed at Memorial Gym. Like I was like, what are we doing here?
Certainly found its footing. Arkansas and A&M are tied for third in the conference at the time of this recording. Again, some games, this weekend and the rest of the week. Vanderbilt, Alabama, Missouri, and Tennessee all tied at 6-4 in the conference. And Jimmy, we spoke on it a little bit earlier. What does Alabama have to do to take that next step before March, knowing there's no more Charles Bediako?
Well, Alabama's played the number one schedule in the country, but they're now starting now a more manageable portion of the schedule. It's been pretty insane up to this point. That's been responsible for some of the up and downs. But the next 4, 5, 6 games are a little bit more manageable than what Alabama has seen, basically starting from the first week of November. Secondly, the injury situation. 13 players, 3 are now out for the season. Several other players are out this game or that game. Holloway's got a wrist. Reitzel injured his leg in the last game. Philon's missed time. The injury situation has just been outrageous. Nate Oates said last week he's never seen anything like it as long as he's been coaching. But if Alabama can finally get healthier and now you've got a more manageable part of the schedule, I think Alabama can string together some wins here and get solidly into this SEC race.
Yeah, that's kind of where Tennessee is in its schedule, kind of that sweet spot. Had a couple games against Kentucky, again, where you're beating the crap out of them but can't hold on to a double-digit lead. 17 at home, 14 on the road. It's baffling. Mark Pope is 4-1 against Rick Barnes while at Kentucky, but that one loss, Sweet 16 last year. I'll speak on Tennessee in a moment, but first, Stephen, instead of commenting on Ole Miss this year, I want you to comment on Chris Beard getting thrown out of the game in Knoxville last week. I thought that was so bizarre.
Well, he's trying anything to get this team's attention. It's one of those situations where evaluations just kind of got missed. Ole Miss actually has a European pro on their team, and Elias Kamerding, and he has not adjusted to the American game at all. Travis Perry, kind of a one-trick pony at this point. It's just difficult, and Chris Beard got thrown out of the game. I honestly think he's trying to get his team's attention. However he can do it, nothing is working. They had an 18-point deficit against the Texas Longhorns in the first half, came all the way back and took the lead and lost the game by double figures. That is what the Ole Miss basketball experience is this year. Y'all have ups and downs during the season. Ole Miss has ups and downs in the game.
Wow.
Forwarding to Bediako's attorney that Stephen admits Ole Miss has a European pro on the team.
I think Tennessee has 2 pros that are on the team.
Okay. Forwarding that too.
A conversation for another day in terms of, well, if you're a pro over there, what makes it different here? There's a lot of differences, but again, we can talk about that later. Tennessee really is in the sweet spot of its schedule, playing really good basketball, albeit can't find a way to close against Kentucky. Beat Auburn a couple weeks ago, outlasted Georgia in overtime on the road, beat Alabama and Charles Bediako a couple weeks ago, A&M in overtime, and, Mississippi State earlier this week, LSU this weekend, Oklahoma coming up next week, and then you got 2 against Vanderbilt, Missouri, Alabama. Those are going to be some challenging games to end the season. So Nate Ament is coming alive, looking like that lottery pick everybody thought he was going to be. Jacoby Gillespie will make you pull your hair out of your brain sometimes, but his scoring has been great. He's a great facilitator as well. It's about finding that consistent third. It doesn't have to be one person. One night it can be Bishop Boswell. One night it can be J.P. Estrella. Tennessee's got no consistency on the front court, and I think that's been really, really frustrating for Rick Barnes so far this year. But I'm intrigued to see how Tennessee finishes. They need to take advantage of this stretch of games they're in because, again, it's going to get tougher. Vanderbilt twice, Missouri, Alabama still on the schedule to close out the regular season. A lot going on for all of our teams. Football conversation never stops. Basketball season's heating up. Baseball season begins this weekend. We had our first ever baseball squad show earlier this week. I hope you guys all checked that out. Hey, NCAA battling in the court systems against Trinidad Chambliss and Joey Aguilar. Trinidad's earlier today. Joey's is tomorrow, both seeking preliminary injunction to be the quarterbacks for Ole Miss and Tennessee in 2026. Fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. For Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss, Corey Burton, Locked On Vandy, Jimmy Stein, Locked On Bama. I am Eric Cain of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for being here. This has been the SEC Squad.